Welcome everyone. My name is Vera, Policy Advisor at the Institute for Security and Technology. Institute for Security and Technology is a nonprofit institute that seeks to outpace emerging security threats at the intersection of technology and policy. We really try to exercise bias for action and bring really interesting people and conversations and policy and tech solutions together on some interesting issues you might have heard, like ransomware, democracy, disinformation, and a lot of other things in between. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. I am super excited to have this conversation. And that is on elevating women and girls at the intersection of technology, national security, public policy, politics, and really public life. And what we need to do to really elevate this conversation, move this forward. I think the statistics show women represent 50% of the global population. Yet we have a way to go to ensure that women actually have a seat at the decision-making table, whether it's in the halls of Congress, whether it's in elected office, in appointed office, whether it's at the C-suite of technology companies, CEOs of presidents and executive directors of foundations and nonprofit organizations and civil societies, and of course, academia. So this is what we're going to talk about. This is going to be really fascinating conversation, what I'd like to say, real talk with some unbelievable women that we have gathered here today. And of course, what we'll do here before I introduce these phenomenal women, for a little bit of logistics, we will have a conversation, and then towards the end of the hour, we will also open it up for questions as well. So without further ado, let me actually introduce my esteemed panelists. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Robin Kelly, representing Illinois' 2nd Congressional District that she started serving in 2013. She has worked to expand economic opportunity, community wellness, and public safety across the state, championing numerous initiatives to generate job growth, reduce health disparities, and even gun violence. Congresswoman Kelly is Vice Chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the main policy writing body of the House, and serves on the Health, Energy, and Consumer Protection and Commerce subcommittees. Her energy and commerce work is focused on expanding access to healthcare, consumer protection for American families, and economic development. She is a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform and serves on the National Security and Civil Rights and Civil Liberties subcommittees. She is also represented in the Midwest region on the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, which sets the policy direction of the Democratic Caucus, and serves as a member of the House Democratic Partnership. Also, staunch supporter for common sense for gun reforms, responsible for community policing, and is the co-chair of the Congressional Gun Violence Preventing Task Force, and is the author of the 2014 Kelly Report on Gun Violence in America. In addition to a lot of accolades, she's also, Congresswoman Kelly has also served for the state of Illinois and has actually been one of the leaders in trailblazing and advancing women and girls, and also on technology related issues. So we are thrilled to have you. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Lauren Buitta is the founder and CEO of Girl Security, a pretty familiar face, I would say, to the community on these issues. She had began her career in national security in Chicago also, and was a policy analyst for National Strategy Forum, a nonpartisan national security think tank. While in law school, she launched her own consulting firm, Steel Consulting, advising clients on these issues. But relative to this point, to this conversation, she realized in 2016, Lauren, that you realized that there's underrepresentation of women in national security, and that we really need new approaches for security. So Lauren has been a fellow with the Carnegie Endowment for National Peace, the Truman National Security Project, American Bar Association Standing Committee on Law and National Security, among others. And most recently, very cool, Lauren was named one of 50 women making the world a better place by InStyle magazine. Next is Camille Stewart. Camille is the global head of product security strategy at Google. also a pretty familiar face. Camille Stewart is an attorney and executive whose cross-cutting perspectives on complex technology, cyber and national security and foreign policy issues has landed her in significant roles in leading government and private sector companies, including serving the Obama administration at the Department of Homeland Security, leading product security for Google. Among some of the things that Camille has done are of course, a very well-known Share My Cyber campaign, elevating also diverse voices and women in cybersecurity. And Camille is just one of the most prolific authors and voices in the field. So thank you, and so excited to have you. And last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome IST's own Alexa Wehsener, who is the Research and Operations Manager at IST. She graduated from UC Berkeley and has been broadening the space at the intersection of emerging tech and national security. A lot of her work has focused on AI techniques and US NC3, as well as novel technologies and platforms, warfighting at the edge, strategic stability, human cognitive security, and democratic institutions. She oversees a lot of the work here at IST and is just one of the, I think, one of the biggest and best, brightest voices to come of the next generation leaders at the intersection of technology and security. So, phenomenal. So let me just start this. Let me just kind of open up the first question. I'm going to actually ask all of you, and maybe Congresswoman, I can start with you. So I mentioned in my opening remarks that women represent roughly 50% of the population. We have so much to do when it comes to ensuring that women and rising leaders, women and girls here, rise up to ensure that they actually have a voice at the decision-making wherever they decide to go. So talk to us, practically speaking, how do we make that happen? How do we ensure that this is reality? And where do we actually get to go? So I'll start with the Congresswoman, and then maybe we can go to Lauren, Camille, and Alexa.
Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you so much for inviting me to be with an esteemed panel for sure. But I think we need to look at pipeline first and foremost. And, you know, we have to have mentorships and support programs. We need people like you have on the panel going into schools, not waiting till people get to college or they graduate from college, but really going in at a younger level to expose people to people like themselves. And I also think it's an equitable issue too. It's one thing to hire people into your company, but what do you do to ensure that women and people of color are actually advancing? Do we just bring them in and then, you know, and or do we really mentor and give opportunities and exposure, you know, and things like that? I'm the co-chair and co-founder of the Caucus on Black Women and Girls, and we've done things all over this country. And we did something in Seattle on the cultural homelessness of Black women in STEM, and how, you know, yes, you might have this great job, but it may be lonely otherwise. So we have to take that, you know, loneliness away. We have to make sure we have paid family leave and, you know, fair pay and all of that kind of stuff. But it starts with the pipeline, even to get, you know, girls, women, teens involved or interested.
Absolutely. Lauren, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for including me in this panel. And I would agree with, or I affirm what the Congresswoman noted, which is kind of getting past the perception that girls starting earlier, especially at the upper middle school and high school ages, can't access this type of programming around technology and cybersecurity. And I think part of that is still our society's perception that girls and women don't play a proactive role in their security, even though they do every single day. So I think some of the societal norms around girls and security needs to change. I know in our experience with girl security, the work that we do, especially at the high school level, is still sensationalized. Girls and security, girls going after bad guys. So even just the language or kind of the patina of programming for girls is still sensationalized. So I think that needs to be normalized as well. And I think also, just building off of what the Congresswoman said, education inequity. There are perceptions of security particularly in under-resourced communities that we work with, that are negative. And so we need to think about how that one-size-fits-all marketing or approach to this type of education must be equity and trauma informed and must reflect the needs of the communities that we're seeking to diversify and draw that talent from. And I would just say lastly, as well, to the point about mentorship, is having partnerships that are sustainable to ensure that as girls and women advance, they have the types of support and resources that they need to sustain themselves through the top and change the status quo, which is so deeply entrenched. So I really appreciate the Congresswoman's remarks and just wanted to add on to that.
Wonderful. Camille, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think the comments are just going to keep building. So I completely agree with the Congresswoman and with Lauren. I would say part of building that pipeline and creating access is acknowledging and making room for the people that are already working in this space. The women, the people of color that are breaking down barriers and doing really trailblazing work in the space already, right? Their mere presence is a knock on traditions and the status quo that we're talking about. And so elevating their presence not only creates new opportunities for them, it also opens the aperture for the next generation to recognize that young women too can be involved in national security and technology and cybersecurity, and is an important part of that cycle. Because if you don't see people that look like you succeeding in the space, even with that access and exposure, you might not want to venture down that pathway when there are other industries and fields that seem much more accessible and have many more opportunities for you to seemingly succeed. So that is a really important part to feeding that pipeline, as well as the innovation that will come from incorporating those voices will allow for new opportunities. And as we do that, we should do that across a number of different lines. That generational diversity that Lauren is talking about, including girls in the conversation, needs to start early and often and be a part of panels like this and conversations about how we drive forward these sectors.
No, that's spot on. Alexa, wanted to get your thoughts. How is it realistic, and kind of what do we need to do to ensure that women and girls rise up to have a seat at the table?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And just to even further build off of what's already been said, aside from just access and exposure, I think once young women are actually within the career field, it's incredibly important, like Camille's saying, to not only elevate the voices that have been there, but ensure that there's connection between the voices that have been there and the new ones that are now present, to ensure that the environment and women and girls are given the tools to be able to better navigate those early stages, to ensure then that they can stay, and not only stay at the table, but be successful at the table.
No, all of these, all of these comments are spot on. And I think, there's clearly, we have a way to go. And I think it's going to involve all of us and all of the allies to really push this agenda forward. And then, speaking about allies, here's a question. What would you want, and I'll take this question to all of you, what would you want from the male colleagues, male allies to do? How should they really support and elevate women across the different fields? And I have one follow-up, straight up question that I'll ask afterwards, but what when we think about allyship, what is it for women? What does that really look like? I'm curious. Lauren, if you want to start.
That's a really important question, and it's one that we receive often. I think there is a more visible level of male allyship that is critical. For example, we have several male champions of girl securities work who have made important inroads for us in institutions or scenarios in which we might not otherwise be included. But I almost think that some of the less often seen, the more invisible interactions that occur on a regular basis are as crucial as some of those more profound stands against misogyny and discrimination in the field. And so generally speaking, I think just an openness to learning and self-education are things that I think can be quite transformative on an individual level, affecting the experiences of all of the Alexas and the rest of us.
Absolutely. Congresswoman, if you want to take that one as well.
I mean, the truth of the matter is I would not be on this Zoom with everyone if it wasn't for Representative Will Hurd, if it wasn't for my staff, Matt McMurray. It was guys that got me into this. And even though I came kicking and screaming, but I was the ranking member on the IT subcommittee, and all my friends back home, they laughed about that and said, oh my goodness, but it was, you know, Will Hurd, and like I said, my staff that really took the time. We worked together. Really, they gave me opportunity to learn more, and definitely great partners. Then we went into artificial intelligence. I mean, we went places I never thought, you know, that I would go. But actually, the truth of the matter is that is why I'm an elected official, because 5 men came to me and asked me to run many moons ago now. So I think it's important that there are, you know, men and women mentors and things like that, because, you know, people bring themselves to the table, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
whether they're a man or a woman, and they, you know, and they can share with you their experiences and what they know and open various doors and opportunities.
absolutely. I mean, I think that's important. I think it's really important to really find and cultivate those mentors, you know, men and women. And I know in my career, I've often had, it's been both men and women who've really propelled me from very early on. So phenomenal. Camille, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Congresswoman's comments really underscore the intentionality that it takes, right? They reached out to her. They saw in her the skill sets and abilities to be really good at politics, right? They cultivated that in her. They sought out that mentorship relationship. And that's what's really important, that intentionality, to do it across gender lines, across ethnic lines, to identify the talent in people, to open and expose them to opportunities, career paths that they may not be, you know, exposed to, but also that they may just not know the pathway towards, right? So many of these spaces are about the network you've cultivated and who you know that can open this door and that. And if you've got the ability to open a door, do that, especially for someone who traditionally would not have stepped into those spaces. So the intentionality is key.
Absolutely. And Alexa, what do you think in terms of male allyship?
I think on top of the previous remarks, a lot of it can go back to the pipeline, back to the classroom, in recognition there that women, girls within education can take leadership roles, not just necessarily with their grades, but with group projects, with being exposed to national security issues and having that interest there. And that can be cultivated within the home life, with teachers, with mentors that aren't necessarily career field mentors, but that encourage this openness and this idea that it doesn't necessarily matter what you look like or what someone's perception of what you look like, and how that shouldn't place you in a certain career.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, it's intention. It's starting early, like you said, the pipeline. It's also to me, it's also kind of thinking through biases and sort of our inherent biases that come up, and then how we all deal with it to make sure that we not only think about that pipeline, promote women and mentor them, but also sponsor them. It just doesn't stop, even when you've actually, I think, achieved or gotten to a certain place. I want to kind of turn a little bit more quasi women. This is a question about women, but also somewhat policy. Congress, I'm going to ask two sides of the question. This is towards Congresswoman, and then the other one to Camille specifically. So Congresswoman, for you, I mean, you've had an illustrious career already in politics and public service, both in Congress and state legislature. And so from your experience, have opportunities changed for women in public service since you have entered at the beginning, started your public service career? And then Camille, kind of same question to you, but a little bit of a flip. Also public service, from your time when you entered public service, but thinking also in terms of your private sector career, let's say at Google and other, obviously you're involved with a lot of different efforts, including, like I mentioned, Share Mike and Cyber and other efforts. So thinking about opportunities for women and also specifically related to cybersecurity, technology, and related fields, and national security broadly, I should say, like where we are relative to where we've been, and curious from both of you, kind of, and not just kind of how far where we need to go, but kind of like where we are to where have we been, and in some ways it's like where's the kind of what do you see in the future? So Congresswoman, let me kind of start with you on that one.
Well, I mean, I think things have gotten better, but I also feel there's still so many hurdles, starting a career in public service. It feels like women get in a little bit later. I mean, some things are changing now in Congress, but even if you look at us, I think we're 52% of the population in the United States, and how many women senators do we have? And still, even with in the House, we have more women, but in comparison, there's still a lot of work to do. How many women governors can you name? I mean, Black women have certainly had a breakthrough when it comes to mayors. When you think about Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta, New Orleans, now Boston and St. Louis, but still, we're still saying, this is the first. The people Biden has put in place, they're the first. We're still saying that despite it being 2021. So yes, I think things have gotten better. There's, heck, I have Nancy Pelosi as my speaker, and on the political side, I'm the first female chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois, first Black chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois. So yeah, we can point to things, but there's still a lot of work to do, in my opinion, in my part of the world, with getting more women to the table. There's still a lot of work to do.
No, I mean, absolutely. I think it's part of that. I mean, I'll say this. There's a lot of work to do in terms of also empowering women, I think it's also training women, ensuring that women have the skills and the tool set to even go into, whether it's in, running for office and elected positions as well as appointed ones as well. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think that women do have the skill sets. We get along better. We negotiate better, a lot of different things. When I was in the State House, I mean, we have a bipartisan, bicameral, women's caucus. The men don't have that, and when we play softball, the women Congress people play against the women reporters, the Republicans play against the Democrats. You know what I mean? It's just, I think we have the skill sets, it's the opportunity and the resources that we don't have.
Absolutely. And I apologize. It's really,
No.
the resources as well as the tools.
Yeah.
Okay, Camille, I'm curious your perspective also from both, like you're sort of in an appointed position and then obviously public service, but also in technology. I'm just very curious to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, much the same. There's a lot of work to be done and we've made progress. There have been these inflection points, right? After the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, we're still kind of in a moment where folks are focused on diversity of all kinds, but particularly ethnic diversity. The Me Too movement catalyzed conversations around misogyny and things like that. So we've had these inflection points that have driven a little bit more change, so it accelerated it, but there's still work to be done, particularly at the intersection of these things. Women of color, girls of color are facing twice the challenges, right? They've got, hardships from being an underrepresented minority and from being a woman, and their stories aren't often heard or appreciated. And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. One of the things that slows progress is these broad overcategorizations of minorities or being underrepresented. Every ethnicity, every racial group, every gender requires something different to bridge the gaps that have been created by the systemic inequities they're facing. And so we should do work to be a bit more specific in the conversations we're having and in the solutioning that we're doing. And I think that would drive more change, more sustained change. But I am encouraged by some of the work that has gone on by the cyber community's acceptance and rallying around the Share the Mic and Cyber movement, the embrace of girl security. You can't go anywhere without hearing about the work that Lauren is doing. And so that kind of recognition of the importance of these kinds of platforms is really good. But the sustained investment from everyone is what's necessary to make change. So I want to see that. I want to see more of that intentionality.
It sounds like intentionality is one of the key words here in this conversation, without a question. Let me kind of turn in perhaps a little bit more of on a personal tone. And Alexa, if I can start with you, go to Lauren, and then we'll go to Camille and Congresswoman. If you can talk a little bit about your careers, and it could be a part of life story as well, of course. What obstacles, if any, do you feel you've had to overcome to get to where you are today? And, you know, you just, if like there's an example, and, you know, I asked this question because I know there's a lot of younger women and girls that are probably tuning into this webinar and will watch it also afterwards. And, you know, our lives are not perfect. Everyone has ups and downs and a lot of obstacles that they need to overcome. So I asked that partly because how do we ensure that as women and girls are entering this space, whether it's in public policy and political life and national security and technology, that we teach them how to have resilience, regardless of what obstacles that may come their way. So maybe you can share a personal example. So Alexa, let's start with you. Sure.
So I think for me personally, my background into higher education, you know, not my entire family hasn't had the opportunity to go through higher education. I never grew up seeing briefcases in the home or parents that went into the office. So I think that blue collar lifestyle enabled me to have a more self-starter mindset, I think, because certain things that were the norm with what I found a lot of my friends once I got to university were not for me growing up. So I think that taking also economic status into account, and even now when reviewing resumes, right? So if a lot of folks have worked minimum wage jobs, but have been able to do things perhaps on the side, but not to a full capacity as like an unpaid internship or a slew of them, I do really take that into account now when I'm doing hiring for IST, because it does show that there's the willingness to put in the hard work, but there's also the recognition and responsibility of the real life that denotes maturity at a younger age and the ability to carry a lot of balls at the same time and continue to juggle, right? I think that first of all, just having that mindset of being a go-getter, and even though you might not have the same opportunities, but still being willing to seek out what you can do with your current circumstances, I think is really important. And if I can just add quickly to that, on the mindset piece, I hear a lot of young women, a lot of my peers making statements or apologizing for things in the workplace. And, you know, always will pull aside my colleagues and say, hey, you don't need to apologize for that. We as women don't need to apologize. You're not going to hear a man doing that. Just accept, if you make a mistake, accept the mistake and then say what you can do better moving forward, you know. No, what I spent like a stint, thought I might go into the military and did some military training. And one of the best things I learned there is that no one cares about your sorry. And as a woman, that's really important, especially as a young woman, because you're constantly apologizing for lack of experience, lack of time, not being able to juggle everything, or just your demeanor in general. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes the sorry makes sense in a cultural setting and naturally, but professionally, you can just take responsibility in the same way a lot of young men just naturally do. And some don't, right? But it's important to adopt that similar mindset so that you can help propel yourself forward and take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves in the networks that do.
That's fantastic. And just to follow up to that before we go to Lauren, is that sometimes I think, to your point, I think sometimes we women apologize even when there's nothing to apologize for. And it's almost, I know I have to stop myself in the tracks a lot of the times, and someone will say to me, I was like, why are you saying sorry? There's nothing to be sorry for. So fantastic. Lauren, anything you can share, what obstacles that you feel like you've had to overcome to kind of...
I think sometimes sorry is the Midwest. I have to say that. The apology does come from my Midwesternness sometimes, but I would say when I think back on my career, I mean, I ultimately left the field because I had a male boss who behaved very inappropriately in my mid-20s. But I also think back on my childhood, which is why I have such a great sensitivity for girl security and the girls that we encounter. I had such fervor. I was protested to be an altar girl. I wanted to play football. My dad put me on as a construction worker through college in Chicago, where I was working as a manual labor. I was chock full of resilience. And I think what's so striking is when I went to law school, I was later on in life, and I had a professor who made an inappropriate comment. I later reported him, and who handed me my law school certificate across the stage, that professor who I'd reported. And so I think by the time I did hit a professional point where I did have someone, act inappropriately and there was trauma, I just had felt I couldn't do it anymore. It felt like it was a really wearing fight to kind of have to continue to advocate for my own intellect, to try to be taken seriously, to try to talk about research subjects that I was passionate about, like the Soviet nuclear complex, and have people laugh. And so I think I ultimately left the field for almost a decade. I worked on racial discrimination and civil rights in Chicago, which I'm grateful for that time, because I think it gave me a point of perspective to think about how I could really contribute to the field and ensure that girls and women, at least to the best of my ability, didn't have the set of experiences that I did, but also to really understand systemic change and how policy change can have an impact, as well as case law if needed. And so I think my career really culminated in girl security in the sense that it was, everything that I had experienced in the hopes that another girl who's, 5 or 6 years old and thinking about the military, I was playing with my brother's G.I. Joes and didn't want to be Scarlet, can grow up and be that person. And I think we have gotten stuck in a space where we accept the status quo, that it can't change, but we should be able to build a national security workforce where it's not normalized to be sexually harassed or racially discriminated against. That is a feasible reality that we need to work towards. And I think there's a sense of complacency that we can't change it. But to Camille's point, it's the hard work that starts at the individual community level. It's understanding the experiences of the blue collar, or of the girl from the south side of Chicago, or for the girl from another region and her experiences. It's hard work, but we have to do it. And I'm so grateful to be on a panel with so many remarkable women who are doing so.
I mean, this is first of all, it's very just touching to hear your story, Lauren, number one. And it's just amazing to me as you were talking. Obviously, I was also thinking about how some of these issues have been brought to light because of the Me Too movement. And exactly what you say, in some ways, there's obviously more advocacy and action, but how much further we still need to go at every single level to get to address some of this. Camille, I want to talk, turn over to you. If you can talk a little bit about kind of obstacles that you've had to personal, professional, you've had to overcome. These stories are very powerful, and I think will be very inspirational. So,
yeah, I mean, at a base level, I am the child of immigrants from the Midwest, and so a career in national security is not something that I would have ever fathomed growing up. Luckily, my dad's a computer scientist, so I developed a love for technology, and then I just wanted to be a lawyer. And the way that came together for me landed me in national security. Which is why I'm so attuned to the fact that access and exposure is important. I probably would have done some things differently and explored some things if I understood what national security was and what it meant in my life, particularly being the child of immigrants. I have a very strong worldview and a connection to the world, and understanding how societies and communities interact and how they rely on each other, and bringing that lens to international relations and national security could have been an awesome opportunity to start very early, to start with conversations like they're having in girls' security. But in this space, I mean, I've had experiences like having people physically close me out of conversations. I get invalidated quite a lot. That assumption that I must be the intern or new in some way is a very classic refrain, but it is an ever-present one. I feel like when people don't expect you to show up in the room, they always find they create a narrative in their head about why you must be there, and it's never usually the right one. And so I actually have come to appreciate being underestimated, because then I'm going to show up and show out, and you won't do it again. But I shouldn't have to do that, right? So I cannot wait for the day where the woman who presents younger than she is, or just this woman who shows up in a national security or senior level tech meeting, is not underestimated or miscategorized.
Those are just really, really wise words, just because the underestimation piece of it is, I think, so true. And sometimes I think we women, we will take a pause first before we speak, and then slowly kind of take away those assumptions. And of course, I certainly relate to your being a child of immigrant, being a political refugee myself. This is, I think, certainly has shaped my upbringing and my career aspirations and progression, I should say, in this field. Congresswoman, certainly last but not least, over to you, and just any kind of obstacles or stories you can share.
My lack of technical skills are haunting me. I think my first barrier was myself and my lack of confidence in me. When the gentleman came and asked me to run for office, for a while, I said, no, I can't do it. I'm too sensitive. I'll cry if they talk about me in the paper, blah, 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 blah. But I finally decided to take the leap of faith. But what I did was a typical thing that women at least used to do in getting into politics. We always questioned ourselves, where a man would just jump in, whether he was half as qualified as, a female. So it was that. Also, I've always had to fight and with women too, to hear you're too nice, you'll never make it. You're too nice, you're too nice. And I've always stuck to, people will say this that have known me from college to now, that I have never changed my personality. I've always been the same, and I pride myself, in that. But like, you can be nice and do this. You can care about people. You don't have to be, that other word that they say about us, and it's not one or the other. And, I just pride myself on being me. But, the other barriers are things like, money and resources, being, Camille hit it, being underestimated constantly. Even, I deal with it right now, even though, I tell people I have accomplished a lot. I mean, I don't dwell on that. There's always more to do. And I even feel like it's not enough. You have to do more. You have to keep giving back. You have to keep making a difference. But to this day, you're too nice, or I'm underestimated, or not given, certain opportunities. So, but, I have my way. I've learned to build relations, and allies are important, to value and appreciate other people. And even if leaders haven't been with me, the people have been with me. And that's what really keeps me going, the wind beneath my wings. And also I feel good about, what I'm trying to do and what I have done, because at the end of the day, when all these titles are, tucked away, I want to be proud of me. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror. And that's what I told the 5 men when they first asked me to run. I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day. So that's kind of like my mantra.
I think that's wonderful. And I think, what you touched on is, it's kind of like, I think we women oftentimes think about sort of our values, our morals, sort of like how that actually, plays in, and then in Camille, to what you were talking about, that intentionality into everything that we do and how we even show up in the professional sphere and in personal sphere as well. So I very much can relate to that. Alexa, I know you wanted to follow up if there's a comment you want to mention.
Just quickly, I wanted to thank you, Congresswoman, for saying that, and just relate back to an experience I had in university, or a conversation I had with one of my colleagues she's out in DC pursuing sustainability, and that's her passion. But I remember sitting there talking about how can we, we like to be feminine. We want to be ourselves, but how can we do this in these careers and be successful? Because we had this perception that women had to be a certain way, that, you have to be recognized like that in the workplace. And we're like, well, that's not, we want to be able to be ourselves. And how can we do this? And I remember a year later, we sat in the same place and had the same conversation. And it gives me chills to say this, but because of women like you, Congressman, and Camille and Lauren and Vera, we said, there's women that have already shown up and broken into some of that barrier. And because of that, we're going to be able to be ourselves. And then maybe we can break that barrier a little bit more for the women that are coming behind us, and just continue to further open up this space. So I just wanted to thank all of you on this panel, because that was actually a really contingent point that I had in university, even thinking about going into these spaces, and that I talked about often with my fellow female classmates and colleagues.
No, yeah, exactly. That's, also triple thumbs up. That is fantastic. Camille, I think I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, Alexa, I'm so glad you said that. And you too, Congresswoman. I just feel like that is an important point to underscore. Like, show up authentically and fully yourself. That is your value proposition, right? And you'll see that the women who have broken into these spaces and made it their own have added value in a way that has made their careers shine and skyrocket, and are slowly changing the way folks think about what expertise looks like and how conversations can be held, and the ways in which we move forward. That is part of that innovation dynamic. That's part of evolving the field. We should not show up and try to fit into a mold. We should leverage our experiences, leverage our insights, and even like the small rebellions of, I used to show up at DHS when I was in the administration in bright red pants. I do not care. I am professionally dressed, but we're gonna add some color to this, right? Like, why is everybody in black and gray all the time? I mean, I love black, it's very slimming, but also these red pants are fire and I'm going to wear them today. So, show up as yourself. It doesn't take anything away from you. It will only make you feel more comfortable, be able to own your expertise and feel like you've made it your own. And in that is a lot of power.
I have to tell Camille, I'm the shoe queen. So I have all kind of every color, every pattern, that kind of thing. So that's me.
I love it.
That is it. You just a side note, Camille, you have reminded me, years ago, I would show up to meetings at the State Department, the Pentagon, and anyone who knows me really well, my favorite color is turquoise or baby blue. You have burgundy too, and I have this like bright turquoise jacket, and I would always pair it with like a black slacks or black dress, but it was a bright turquoise, and I was very unashamed about it. And I would have colleagues who would look at me weirdly. You're going to brief someone on disinformation on whatever the national security topic is in that jacket? Like, it's almost like, and we wouldn't say, but there was a little bit of like, wow, you know, but I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's my authentic self. So yes, color. I love that.
Oh, sorry, Vera. I just wanted to add really quickly to Alexa's point is, I think national security also suffers from an elitism that I know many experienced. And my dad, who was a carpenter, has said one of his proudest moments is when I referenced a joke that he made that our family crest was 2 beef jerky sticks across a bottle of Schlitz, which is an alcohol that is, you know, familiar, at least in Chicago. I think that when I was young and I brought to bear myself in the same way, coming from the Midwest, coming from the blue collar background, it was startling to have conversations where if you didn't go to X school, you weren't included at the table, or if you hadn't read X book, or if you hadn't done research or had exposure to a particular network. So I love what everyone is saying about valuing the individual as opposed to valuing kind of the assets that they may be associated with to start. And I think it's wonderful, Alexa, and you should be very proud of all that you've accomplished so far.
That's why we love her. Yeah, she's amazing. Alexa's amazing. Let me actually, and then to that, and I want to kind of keep it personal before I open the floor. I know there's a lot of, you know, Paul, we can go on in terms of policy conversations, in terms of women in cyber and all of that. But I think some of these personal experiences are actually even more enriching. So, and I might actually add to this one, talk to me a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship, but not just, we all know that mentorship and sponsorship is important, but is there a mentor or a sponsor that has been really, really instrumental in your life, male or female, that you feel that really either not just has opened doors for you, but has been with you through the thick and thin, and also has given you feedback and constructive criticism, even when you may not want to hear it, which I think it's important. I know I have had a couple of mentors like that in my life. And I think of one woman in particular who has been with me, not just been really instrumental, instrumental in advancing my career, but really been there through when things have been really low. And this is something I never forget. And I personally, I'll tell you my stories that I remind these 2 women probably on a monthly basis how much I value them. And I'm not kidding, including sending them baked goods across the country. So so let me kind of start to you all. Lord, if you can just take us, just talk to us about not just the value of mentorship and sponsorship, but sort of if a personal, you know, sort of the reason I highlight the personal experience, like what should women look for in a mentor and sponsor? That's why I also asked that question.
That's an interesting question. I mean, the focal, or at least one of the focal points of Girl Security is kind of peer-to-peer mentoring, as well as that intergenerational mentoring, which I think is so important, and we need more of it. We always need more mentorship. My mentor passed away in last April, and he was the person who, when I left my position, because I'd had trauma with a male boss, gave me an opportunity to manage a project that transformed my life. And he did so because he really believed in my capabilities, and he gave me the space that I needed to lead, which was not an experience that I'd had. There was never a point at which he was trying to box me in or take credit for my accomplishments or backtrack on things that I said or give me false accountability if things went wrong. I had total control and ownership over what the work that we were doing. And in addition, he was a white man who had accumulated quite a bit of wealth over the course of his life, although he had been discriminated against as a Jewish person as a young boy. And he really leveraged his privilege. He would invite a group of people to a really fancy thing and then leave and seat them with the, you know, most kind of in-demand people at the table, and basically just drop conversation bombs where he would highlight the expertise of all of these people. He was a brilliant person, and I wish he was here. But I think that idea of creating space without fear, I think in mentoring, sometimes we're afraid that a young person, an up and comer, although Alexa, I don't know if I'd qualify you as that, might suck up the space. And I think we need to get past that mindset and realize the more of us, the more space we create for each other, the more co-ownership and collaboration and innovation and change we can make together. I think we're moving in that direction, but I think that's where mentorship, especially at a more senior level, can be so transformative for many people, you know, from the highest ranking to some of the more entry level positions.
Well, that's fabulous. Congresswoman, let's over to you on that, on mentorship.
You know, it's interesting because I can truly say that I don't feel like, at least for a while when people said, who's your mentor? I really couldn't name anyone, to be honest. I mean, I look at Barbara Lee in Congress, you know, as we say, Barbara Lee speaks for me. And so, you know, I watch her and those kind of things. But of course, I had many years before I went to Congress. But when I think in the political world, there's two gentlemen, and they weren't the original 5 men that asked me to run. They came into my state rep race after, and I don't make a move without speaking with them first. And yes, one is so nice. The other one can be brutally honest, and which is good. But I remember I had an important decision to make, whether I should give up my state rep seat and become the chief of staff in the Illinois State Treasurer's office. And I called him every day for 3 weeks, and I cried every day because it was just such an emotional, you know, decision for me. So I think of these 2 men that have been with me from state rep until now, but personally, it's been a few women that I feel like I can lean on. I don't know if it's mentor or just people, as someone said, that has been with through thick and thin, and, you know, like that kind of thing. Someone I can show my real self to, you know, and, you know, that kind of thing. But on the other hand, I have a lot of mentees, and sometimes I've wanted, you know, so many people, political, young people, you know, like my children say, she has us, but she has a whole lot of kids, you know, that she's there for, because I just really believe that you have to pay it forward, give it back, you know, bring other people along, because I do believe we all do better when we all do better. So, you know, I try to make that space that Lauren talks about.
Oh, that's wonderful. Alexa, curious, you talked about mentorship, not just in practice, but if there's anyone who's been kind of instrumental in your life so far.
I think I've been fortunate to have a few people thus far that have been instrumental. I think it starts quite honestly with my father, talking about a lot of, you know, the ways that women are expected or societally expected to be into certain things. And similar to Lauren, as a young girl, I was like, I want to be a soldier. Everyone's like, you should help your young girl. And he just was like, no, that's what she wants to do. If she wants to work with nukes, whatever it is. So I think from a young age, having that opportunity in the home, at least just from a supportive nature, was really important. I think that too, as time has gone on, just, you know, even within IST, think of Philip as a mentor, yourself, Vera, as a mentor, really just, I've been fortunate enough, and I think this speaks to how the space has opened in recent years, to have really good experiences with the leadership above me, at least immediately. There's, you know, I can't tell you how many folks, when I spoke at the Deterrence Symposium, came up to me and said, oh, you don't look like you belong here. And these were all men, and just straight up. And that was, you know, and then of course, when I was interested in a military career, how many folks came up and said, you don't look like a Marine. You're never going to be good enough. You'll never be fast enough. So I think that I've been fortunate to identify some of those people and have those people in my professional realm, but also have then learned how to identify folks that aren't going to be in your corner. And I think that's kind of equally important. some people really are there to help propel you forward, and some people are definitely not. And being able to identify those key characteristics from just the introduction in body language, it has been really important and has honestly saved me. And then being able to have those conversations with mentors of what are this person's real intentions necessarily, and be guided through that has really saved me and helped propel me forward to where I am now.
Man, you hit the nail on the head there. How much, we talk about sort of the positivity of mentors and people who are like looking out for us, but looking for those signs of people, who can really trip you up and may not have your best intentions. That's huge. And that, quite frankly, is a make or break. I often say, and this is advice I give to a lot of folks, that, you go into whatever job you're going to go into, career field, is, half of it, I would say 80% of it is the people, right? And who you're going to be working with and for in the dynamics. And 20% is what you actually do. So I think that's so important, Alexa. So thank you for bringing that perspective. Camille, over to you. Just thoughts on mentorship, and is there someone, like a mentor sponsor in your life that you're like, wow, this person really helped me chart the path forward?
Yeah, I have been blessed with a number of mentors, like a patchwork of peer mentors and otherwise. But I'll probably deviate a little bit to emphasize a few other kinds of mentorship and sponsorship, just because I think there's a lot of pressure around those sustained relationships. And especially as women, when you find women who are doing something that you're interested in at a high level, it can be hard for them to manage home obligations and career obligations and participate in that shared mentorship. And I find that it actually becomes discouraging for the mentor to participate. So I always encourage mentorship moments. I have gained so much from someone taking a moment to impart whatever wisdom they have to share for that limited period of time. And sometimes it circles back and expands to more, and sometimes it doesn't. Suzanne Spalding is a great example of that. When I was working at the Department of Homeland Security, this senior policy advisor who had no reason other than you're amazing and a lawyer like me and working in this space, would you talk to me for a bit, took time out of her schedule to talk to me for this confined period, and imparted whatever wisdom she had, connected me to a few people. And that was the exchange. I mean, it has turned into more in subsequent years, but I just needed that moment and got so much from it that even if we had never spoken again, it was extremely valuable. So I encourage folks to even think about how they can provide mentorship in a moment, and for the mentees in those moments to appreciate the value of that exchange. I'll highlight a sponsorship example because most of these have been kind of more mentorship-y. Angela Rye, I was working on the Hill in Congressman Cleaver's office in his CBC office, Congressional Black Caucus. And I worked for her because she was the executive director. And a few years later, the administration was looking for cyber professionals to open this office in the Department of Homeland Security. And she put my name forward. We hadn't spoken probably in a year or so, had kept in contact lightly, but she threw my name in with no prompting, no request, and it probably changed the trajectory of my career in ways that I can't quantify. So that was really helpful. And that too was not necessarily a sustained engagement. She hasn't necessarily thrown my name in for a bunch of things, but she saw an opportunity, remembered that was where my expertise lied, and connected me, and it was so valuable. And then I just wanted to underscore Lauren's point about peer mentorship. It's really important. The collaboration with your peers, the learning from them going through something that you may go through next week and vice versa is extremely valuable. They also have some insight into opportunities that might translate into something that you can capitalize on near term. So cultivate those relationships as well.
Okay, so phenomenal. So we are literally 2 minutes to go, but I want to ask one lightning round question. I'm going to ask it a little bit differently for different folks. So Alexa, I would love if you can just do like a quick comment on what should girls and young women in college and high school kind of do? What advice do you give them to kind of enter this field? To the Congresswoman, to Lauren and to Camille, I want you to think back to the beginning of your career. You had just graduated college. What advice would you give yourself? What pep talk or advice would you give yourself in a couple of words based on what you know now? And so let me start with Alexa. Parting wisdom from you.
Yeah, I would say that you're your own best advocate, and that you can carry more than you think you can. And so when you add to the plate, you'll eventually be able to hold it all at the same time. So just to continue with what you're passionate about, and hope things will fall into place if you work hard.
Wonderful advice. Camille?
Operate in authenticity. Be true to the things that make you uniquely you. Owning them will allow you to move through whatever circumstance with confidence and grace.
Oh, amazing. Congresswoman?
One of my favorite little poems is life is a theater, be careful who's in your front row. And so trust in yourself, but make sure you surround yourself with good people who have your best interests at heart. Not that you can't deal with the other people, but put them in the balcony.
I may want to quote you on that analogy. That's phenomenal.
I'll send you the poem.
Please do. Please do. Lauren, last but certainly not least.
I love that. Actually, I think one of the things the Congresswoman said about, I think the concept of leadership is so often misguided, that you can be a leader who is empathetic and introverted and weird and whatever other qualities.
Yeah.
But I also think integrity, to that point, is leading with integrity. My dad would say you have nothing if you don't have your integrity and your health. And I think at the end of the day, as you noted, Congresswoman, you want to be able to put your head on your pillow and feel good about what you've done. And I think that's a wonderful guide for any person, girls and women especially.
Well, this has been, I don't know about you, but to me, it's been an absolutely wonderful, wonderful conversation. First of all, on behalf of IST, thank you all for joining, and to everyone watching, thank you all for joining. We'll certainly have a video for this event, but also to all of you. And for what I really enjoyed about this, yes, we spoke about some challenging issues, policy issues, but sharing also your personal stories, how important it is. That's how the next generation of women learn. And that's how we learn to bring our authentic selves with integrity. And at the end of the day, as I like to say, and what I've really learned, certainly in the last year, we're all in it together, and this is a sisterhood, and we have to be in it together. So again, thank you from myself, from Institute for Security and Technology, and we very much hope to stay engaged with all of you as panelists, and of course to everyone watching, thank you so much. And you can, if you want to learn more about the Institute for Security and Technology, visit us at securityandtechnology.org. Thank you so much.